Bet horse racing on DRF Bets. We'll match your first deposit of $200. Get free expert picks and past performances, plus weekly cash back. All from Daily Racing Form, the most trusted name in horse racing. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Breeders' Cup Prep Recap. I'm Dan Illman, along with Mike Beer. This week's edition is going to take a peek at the Pat O'Brien Stakes, an important prep not only for the Breeders' Cup Sprint, but for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile as well. It was contested on August the 27th, going 7/8 of a mile. As we break from the gate, keep an eye on the number 7, Laurel River, in the pink cap and familiar Juddmonte Silks, because this horse has been very, very good in his last couple of races.
Yeah, he has. There's a layoff that he was dealing with there after a pretty big win going a 2-turn mile last summer, Dan, but he's come back this year. This is only one start prior to this, a blowout allowance win. He gets a really good trip here, but he's always traveling strongly in this race. Everything's going to work out perfectly for him around the turn. He'll come clear between horses at the top of the stretch. He really finishes this race off, though.
He broke sharp. It looks like he could have made the lead if he wanted it, but you see Juan Hernandez take him back. The favorite in this race, Speaker's Corner, was coming off of his race in the Met Mile, where he was running up against Flightline. We thought a drop in class, a drop in distance would work well for the Carter winner. He's in control of this race right now, but he's just not going to finish.
Yeah, he's just sort of lost his form. He got off to a really good start earlier this year. They ran him against Flightline in the Met Mile. They came back his very next start. He's in against Life is Good. He just couldn't go with either of those two horses, Dan, and it feels like maybe that took a little bit of the starch out of him. He hasn't been good since then. He's very disappointing here, but the winner's not. Look at him finish this race off.
Laurel River does finish this race off super impressively. American Theorem came from the back of the pack to finish second. We'll talk about him in a bit. Laurel River was the other Baffert in this race, and as we've seen many times in major races in Southern California, the higher-priced Baffert wins. The other one, Defunded, would come back to win. The Awesome Again at Santa Anita with a 99, one of 3 next out winners to exit the Pat O'Brien. Senor Buscador would win the ACAC at Churchill Downs with a 98. The Chosen Vran has since come back to win stakes races against Calibreds on both dirt and turf. So this is a very live race. Let's talk a little bit more about Laurel River, Mike. Let's get a closer look at him. He is a Juddmonte homebred by the Super Stallion Into Mischief. And this horse got good when stretched out to a mile at the end of 2021. He blew away first level allowance runners, and he was so impressive that Baffert was even making sounds of running the horse in that year's Awesome Again. He decided to pass, and then he decided to pass on everything because he went away for a long time. Something physically must have gone wrong since he's come back. 2 impressive performances. He could run in the sprint. He could run in the dirt mile. They're leaning dirt mile. I think it's the right move.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they could run him in either race, Dan. He showed pretty handy speed in this race. I realized it was 7. He'd have to cut back to 6 if they wanted to run him in the sprint. Either way, he's not the kind of horse who, to me, would necessarily be compromised going 6 furlongs. But perhaps, the 2-turn mile hits him right between the eyes. That was certainly the case in the 2 starts prior to this one at Del Mar. 2-turn miles, blowout wins. This horse, not only is he good, he's got a ton of upside.
American Theorem, the runner-up, looks like he will run in the sprint. And this year's sprint, aside from the heavy favorite Jackie's Warrior and the filly Kamari, it's coming up a little bit light. American Theorem earned a figure in this race. Heck, I believe he got a 101. Laurel River earned a 108. American Theorem, if Jackie's Warrior stubs his toe again in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, could be a bit of a live long shot.
Absolutely, he could. He ran really well in here. I don't think he could complain too much about the trip that he got there. And he was basically in a similar position to the winner for most of the trip. But at the top of the stretch there, where you saw Laurel River get the split and lose no ground, American Theorem had to fan out a good 5 wide in there. I still thought he ran on, pretty well in that race. And ultimately, when you start, pulling his PPs apart, this is a horse who, ran a couple of okay races going longer, but maybe they concentrated on route racing a little too long with him, Dan. He seems like he's way better sprinting. Prior to this race, he won the Triple Bend. He won the Bing Crosby. He ran really well in here. This horse is a major player in the sprint.
It was an off-slow wide trip for Senor Buscador at a price. He was picking up horses at the very end to get third. He would come back to win the Ack at Churchill Downs. I guess he's a fringe player in a Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile this year that looks extremely competitive.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. He's one of the horses who I feel like cutting him back to 6 might not be a great idea for him. Going in the Dirt Mile probably gives him a little bit of a better chance, but he's, sort of one of those one-run closers, and so pace and trip are very important to him.
What do you do with a horse like Speaker's Corner? He obviously had a big first half of the year. Then he runs against Flightline. Then he runs against Life is Good. Then he runs this race, which is subpar. Do you get the feeling maybe he's just a little bit sour and it's time to put him away for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you could really press on with him to the sprint based off of his, last 3 races probably. I mean, he just hasn't really run that well since, again, getting off to a really, really good start earlier this year. And even, Dan, the big win that he's got on his card earlier this year is the Carter, which, these days is sort of a grade 1 in name only, but he did run really well and really fast that day.
Defunded pushed the pace early inside of Speaker's Corner, got tired. He would come back to win the Awesome again. I think he's more effective at longer distances than 7 furlongs or a mile. It looks like he'll skip the Breeders' Cup and go to the Ben Alai. CZ Rocket is a horse that really didn't make much of an impression in this race, but he's a horse that if he shows up in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, he does have plenty of back races that would make him interesting. I'm just not sure about the form he's in right now.
Yeah, this would be, I think, a 3rd straight Breeders' Cup Sprint for him. So we'll see if he can make it back. I mean, you were talking earlier about how live this race was, though, Dan, and CZ Rocket's another horse that sort of confirms that because he came out of this. They ran him in the Grade 2 Santa Anita Sprint Championship. He missed by a nose in there with a 95 buyer. This horse came back and took a little bit of a step forward last time.
And maybe he's just rounding into form at just the right time. Laurel River, 108 buyer speed figure for his win in the Pat O'Brien. Let's take a look at the prices for the Pat O'Brien, because Laurel River, for a horse that's now won 3 in a row, paid $15.80 for Baffert. American Theorem, very rock solid. Sprinting, going a mile, was second. Senor Buscador from off the pace finished third. Laurel River to the Dirt Mile. American Theorem to the Sprint. And both are interesting contenders on Breeders' Cup Saturday.